SEC Media Days will kick off on Monday. We're just a few days away from hearing from all the coaches in the SEC and players, which players are going to be representing each team. They just announced it, and for Georgia, the three guys they're sending out there are Gunnar Stockton, the quarterback, Dawg Everett, cornerback, and CJ Allen, middle linebacker, the junior. This is pretty typical. I went back through and looked at the last few years of the players that Kirby has sent to SEC Media Days to represent the team, and it's a blend of talented players and leadership. That's who he typically sends out there, and I think that Gunnar Stockton, Dawg Everett, and CJ Allen kind of represent that. I talked about it a few months ago, or not a few months ago. Well, this offseason is kind of starting to blend together. Sometime in the last couple months, I talked about who I think are the captains of this football team, who will be the guys that you see at midfield before the game starts on a regular basis. These three are certainly ones that you are going to see over and over take the field for the coin toss and all of that at the beginning of the game. Captains that will lead this team. And look, just because you're a captain that walks on out to the middle of the field or you're not one day doesn't mean that you aren't a captain. And these three are certainly players that embody that. Let's talk about the history here with Media Days and things that will be interesting to talk about with them, right? There's certainly a lot to talk about with this Georgia football team, and we've been doing that every single day for you. But now we'll actually get to talk to them again. The first time since April, right? It's been a 3-month journey to get to this point where we haven't gotten an opportunity to really interact with the program that much. That'll change. Georgia is going on Tuesday. That is a week from today. And we'll get to hear from Gunnar Stockton, CJ Allen, and Dawg Everett. Let's get into this a little deeper. Talk about the other players for the other teams that are being sent out there. I see a former Georgia Bulldog on this list. I see some players with a lot of buzz and a lot of attention. And look, quarterbacks are certainly a theme of this list. Ryan Curley from Dawg Post. Make sure you're going to dawgpost.com. You can see the full list over there on our website, along with all of the other things and deals that we have going on over there at dawgpost.com. So, we'll start with Gunnar and the quarterback situation, right? Kirby typically sends out the quarterback, not every single time, but usually will send the quarterback out. Last season, Carson Beck, senior, Michael Williams, and Malachi Starks were the three sent. In the 2023 offseason, he sent Cedric Van Pran, Kamari Lassiter, and Brock Bowers, a couple juniors and a senior. In 2022, he sent out Stetson Bennett, senior, Nolan Smith, senior, and Cedric Van Pran, the junior. In 2021, they only had two players. He sent out JT Daniels, the quarterback, new quarterback for Georgia, right, who had started a few games, and Jordan Davis, a senior. And there wasn't one in 20. We'll go back to 19. Jake Fromm, the junior, J.R. Reed, a senior, and Andrew Thomas, a junior. So he hasn't sent out a sophomore in the last few years, right? I'm not going to go too far back for this, but the quarterback is typically someone that you want to hear from as a leader. Look, it's one of the most important positions in sports, just in terms of responsibility and skill set and kind of everything that encompasses that position. Here's the thing about Gunnar Stockton. He doesn't have as much to say as some of the former quarterbacks for Georgia. Carson Beck and Stetson Bennett, they weren't necessarily the loudest players out there. They weren't like these big rah-rah guys, and neither is Gunnar. But they are more talkative and a little bit more open than Gunnar. He's just a quiet person. He's just kind of who he is, a little bit reserved. It doesn't cause any rift with the team. In fact, the team loves him. But a guy that you're going to get a lot of smiles, a lot of nods from, and not a ton of in-depth answers, because that's just not really what we've heard out of Gunnar Stockton quite yet. I think for Kirby Smart's purposes, he loves that, right? Have someone out there that's going to give you as little as possible. But look, Gunnar is clearly the starting quarterback for this football team. I know there's not been an official announcement, but it's what you saw when Carson Beck went down at the end of the 2024. It's what you saw during spring practice, and it's what you're seeing now, him sending him out. You don't send your backup quarterback or a guy that's really at risk of not being the starter to media days to represent your football team. It's just not something you see happen. So one thing we learn out of this is, hey, Gunner's QB1, and there's really no disputing that. they'll ask him about the pressure. We'll ask him about the pressure of being the quarterback at Georgia. We'll ask him about how this offense is going to look differently with your legs and your running ability. We'll ask him, what it's like to wait a turn when you're just a guy all 4 years in high school, and then you got to wait for your turn for this moment. There are certainly different storylines to talk about with Gunnar Stockton, but I think the biggest thing to take away from this is, hey, look, he is a leader on this football team. He leads by example. He's not a vocal guy. Kirby would love to have 11 Gunnar Stocktons out there that just care about Georgia and care about leading by example on the football field and the work ethic. So no real surprise that Gunnar Stockton is one of the three here in Media Days. Let's talk about Dalen Everett for a minute. Dalen Everett, I've said this over and over the last about 3 weeks. I think that his return is one of the biggest, one of the most important roster transactions, I would frame it, for Georgia this offseason was Dalen Everett deciding to return for his senior year. Gives you experience and stability at the cornerback position. Another guy that's been around and has seen a national championship at Georgia, right? Obviously didn't contribute much to that 2022 team as a true freshman, but someone who has been around for that, like Gunnar Stockton. I think that little things like that matter, and the skill set and the big playability and the big moment ability, right? You see that in what we're outside of the Notre Dame loss, the two other big games for Georgia, going to Texas and playing the number one team in the country on the road at night, and then the SEC championship game against Texas as well. You see Dalen Everett show up in those types of moments. That is leadership. That is talent. That is recognizing the moment. He's not necessarily like the how do I frame this properly? He's not super talkative, right? So you're not going to get like a ton of, long-winded, super thoughtful answers necessarily. I'm not saying he's not a thoughtful person, but you're not necessarily going to get that from Dalen Everett. But he is, something that you will notice is I think that his maturity level has gone up. In a way, doing this job and getting to, and look, I'm not much older than these guys. I'm only a couple years older than these guys. In a way, you get to watch them grow up a little bit. And you grow up a lot when you're in college. I grew up a lot at Georgia. I'm still growing up, right, as a 24-year-old. But you're seeing these guys come in as 18-year-olds, 19, and get older. And I think that you've seen that with Dalen Everett, and I think you've seen his game grow up. It's not a surprise to me that he is one of the guys that's going to be representing Georgia at Media Day. The youngest of the three, and look, Kirby's not afraid to send juniors out there. He did it with Kamari Lassiter. He did it with Brock Bowers. He did it with Cedric Van Pran. He did it with Michael Williams and Malachi Starks. CJ Allen is next in line in that kind of mold. Hey, clearly one of the leaders of the team, was one of the leaders of the team as a younger player, right? As a true sophomore last season. He was one of the important guys, important cogs in the Georgia machine. He is a vocal leader. He is your vocal middle linebacker. Maybe the most surprising player I look at from 19 to now that wasn't one of the SEC Media Day representatives for Georgia is probably Nakobe Dean, right? When I think about this, Nakobe not being there partially is due to COVID and the timing, but this is the type of guy you get with that. Smart, level-headed, well-spoken, and does it well on the field. That's what you want in a leader. You get that with CJ Allen. I'm not sure that the exact quote I'm blanking on, but I won't forget the premise of what he said back in the spring when NIL was a huge topic of conversation during the spring with pending legal action, right? Pending legislation on it. So it was a topic during the spring. CJ Allen was asked about it, and he said, look, I never needed money to play football before. I don't need it now. Right? Essentially what he said, I play for Georgia. I don't play for money. At the end of the day, they want that money in the future with the NFL, but CJ Allen represents what Kirby wants to build this program on, which is not that. Not the rah-rah, not the pictures, not the money, not the bag, not the cars, but on playing for Georgia. And and really character based. I think that a lot of the recruiting is character based, and you see that, and you see Georgia okay with people walking out or people transferring if they don't fit the mold of what they want at Georgia. And CJ Allen certainly fits that mold, and that's why he's a junior who played a lot early on, is a leader early on, and is now representing his team at Media Day. It reminds me a lot of, obviously a different position, but reminds me a lot of Kamari Lassiter, reminds me a lot of Nolan Smith, right? Well-spoken guy that played when they were young and embodies what Georgia is. That's what CJ Allen is. That's really what all these guys are. And now we're going to get to hear from them in a more official capacity a week from now. If there's anything in particular you want us to ask, put that in the comments down below. And I appreciate you watching.